Tonight, from the Music Box at Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa, I'm David Spatz, and coming up next, we'll chat with the new king of comedy. You like the way that sounds, don't you?
Good line.
Larry King is my guest on tonight's edition of Curtain Call, and it all starts right now.
It all started for me back in Brooklyn, New York. And you would have, I'm going to tell you a story now. This story has been written about in New Yorker in the annals of history. You would never have bet that the people involved in this story would have been successful at all if you could go back.
And we're backstage in the Music Box at Borgata with a gentleman who needs no introduction but insisted on one anyway. We saw him on CNN's Larry King Live for 25 years. He's been in broadcasting for over 50 years. 60,000 interviews. I could go on and on with numbers, but that would take away from his time. Larry King, welcome back to Atlanta
David,
City.
good seeing you again.
Good to see you. Okay, let's get right to it. 25 years on Larry King Live. I think December 16th, you walked away from it, and you could have done just about anything or just about nothing, but then you decide, I'm going to go out and do stand-up comedy.
The way it happened, David, was my nephew is Scott Zeiger, who's very successful, my brother's son.
Base Entertainment, right?
Base Entertainment. And they've got Jersey Boys in Vegas, they've got theaters in Singapore, Macau, and he produced The Producers on Broadway, which was a major hit. And he has seen me work at conventions, and I've done conventions for almost all those 50 years, speaking to General Motors and AMA and so, and I would tell stories. And he says, well, what are you going to do now? I said, he said, you can't stay retired. So I've had a lot of people talking to me about other things, do another radio thing, maybe an hour a day and so. But I love making people laugh. It was a high that I would get, maybe every 3 months do a convention. He said, why don't you try do a little comedy tour? I said, well, I don't want to take too much. I'm coaching my Little League. I don't want to take too much time away from my boys. He said, well, we'll work with William Morris and we'll set up something. So the first place we booked was here, Atlantic City, and then we got Boston, and then next week I'm in Indiana, and then I'm in Biloxi, Mississippi, and then Vegas. So I'm trying to space them out, but the weirdest thing of all this is, and I haven't said this publicly before, but in September, we have a week.
I can't imagine where this is going.
Reykjavik, Iceland, Oslo, Norway, Copenhagen, Denmark, Munich, Germany, and London. One night in each place. I said, you're going to kill me, and also...
Back to back to back.
Yeah, and what about the language barrier? And they said, well, most of these people, of course London, but most of these people speak English. Do you know that all these kids learn English as a second language, like in Oslo and all these kind of places?
Well, English is the international language of the airlines. I know that.
You'll have no problem. Yeah. So.
But Iceland, Larry, I mean, does that really speak to the...
Big in Reykjavik, they love me.
They love you.
Well, the South Side.
But does that speak to the global reach of a CNN?
Oh,
I mean, when
there's
you can
nothing
go...
like what Ted Turner came up with. I'm sure it even shocked him how vast it's gotten. I know he had believed in satellites, and he really thought that he was communicating. Ted looked at the world from longitude, latitude, not Atlanta or Minneapolis. But I'm sure the impact of CNN. And of course, we had a hell of a ride for a long time with no competition.
Right.
And then Westinghouse had one. He got rid of it. He bought them out. But then MSNBC and of course Fox, and it's a different world now. But the international impact, I'm still flipped, David. When I go somewhere and people know me.
But it's enough that you're able to book yourself doing the comedy over there. Would that be a big risk, I would imagine? They know you.
Well, yeah, as Rickles said, what are they going to do to me? So I'm looking forward to it. I'm not a good traveler, by the way. I mean, I fly a lot, and I fly private a lot, and but I like terra firma, but there's also the experience of what's it going to be like. And now I did have one advanced taste. I spoke last year in Mexico for Carlos Slim, the richest man in the world, and he had me speak for he gives 12,000 scholarships a year. And I spoke to all the Mexican students in this giant arena, and it was all by simultaneous translation. and it worked. In other words, you need a good interpreter. But the interpreter was right up on top of the innuendo, and they were laughing as I hit punchlines. I didn't speak seriously. As I hit them, they were right with it, and that made me really feel good, because, yeah, that was amazing to me. And then I spoke 2 weeks ago in Lisbon, Portugal, and again, half the crowd was English. It was a media conference, and the other half was simultaneous, and that worked too. So
Is that as much a function of the technology as it is the material?
it is. And I'm not a technical person at all. I don't know how we're on now. You know, I don't know how the hell you and I are going into people's homes through what?
Tape.
No, but I mean through what? Buckabee. No, but how do we get through? It always amazed me, like, how can we explain this to Thomas Jefferson? Tom, you know Ben's over in Paris now? Yeah. Well, you can talk to him, you can see him, and he can talk back to you.
But they didn't have flat screens.
What's the question I'm asked the most? Whenever I travel, this is unbelievable. I meet kings, princes, heads of country. It always comes up. What was it like to be kissed by Marlon Brando? At the end of our first interview, Brando kissed me, flush on the lips. And I've never been kissed by a man in my life. I'm heterosexual. I don't boast about that. It's natural. I don't mention it in San Francisco. But he kissed me on the lips, and I got to admit it here tonight in Atlantic City. I never stopped thinking about him. About a month ago, I got up in the middle of the night yelling Stella, and I don't know anybody named Stella.
Let me talk a little bit about the comedy. You did the convention circuit, the public speaking thing, and got laughs. But there's a big leap between that and doing a structured 80-minute
So what we did
show.
here, and what we'll try to do, and it's unusual for me to be that structured. First you have to you're doing a production, so you have to have backdrops and pictures. So I tuned that out. I never looked up at the pictures. I saw in advance what
And
they were
that's easy to put. That's technical, and you put that in someone else's
I'll
hand.
put that in someone else's hand. And then it's different in that when I would speak at a convention, I might throw a story here, not do a story there. Here, you're working with producers and directors, so this story opens and that story's in the middle and this story closes, and I close with different things, but they like this, and I will run through the rough edges. But when you get down to it, like doing a broadcast, whether you're doing it worldwide or in Davenport, Iowa, it's still two people talking.
Right.
It's still standing on a stage with a microphone. It is more disciplined. I found this more disciplined. I found at times structured by it. In other words, I had to do the Yogi Berra story when I did it, because that's when they're putting up the Yogi Berra picture. So I don't want to be controlled by the picture. So maybe I'd rather do Yogi 2 minutes later or a little earlier. But when you're doing a show, you have to do. I spoke to Billy Crystal, who did 700 Sundays.
Which is like the closest thing that you can compare.
It's one of the best shows I ever saw.
Right.
And that was 2.5 hours. Scott produced that, my nephew. And that was as disciplined as you get. And Billy, of course, is an actor and a writer. He wrote that show.
He lived that show.
And he lived that show.
But then again, you lived.
I lived this show.
You know, this show.
Yeah, every scene I was in. And you make fun of yourself. I thought 700 Sundays was one of the best Broadway shows I ever saw.
But there's a serious side to 700 Sundays, and
Sad side.
to this, yeah, to this though.
Yeah, in fact, the only thing I did tonight that was new for me, was really new, was telling about Jackie Robinson or what Martin Luther King said to me. Normally I never speak seriously. However, these people are pretty sharp. This director, they say, you know, it's a mix, and it's okay to throw in a little serious moment. You know, it's nice. It happened. People like to hear a little behind the scenes stuff. Your first day on the air. I've never told that story in person. I'll be asked a question,
Right.
and I'll answer it, but it was unusual for me.
Well, the thing about this, the comparisons between this and television, both shows were live. But with this, you know immediately how you're doing. With TV,
Sure.
even with the overnights, it's going to take 6 to 8 hours.
It's what I loved about comedy. What I love about the stand-up comic, and I'm a storyteller, and I know I can tell a story, and I know I can deliver a punchline, I can tell a joke. But the people, I think if I had started over, I'd have been a comic. But the thing I admire most about comics is they go out on a stage, a bare stage, and unlike a drama where you don't know how you're doing, I mean, you're doing your best,
Right.
you hope you have them, you know how you're doing. I asked Bob Hope once, "You're Bob Hope, how much of an edge do you have?" He says, "About a minute and a half. I got 90 seconds where I don't have to be funny, or it don't work, the first gag
They'll
don't
give it
work.
to you.
They'll give you that.
Right.
That's it. Then you know how you're doing. And they won't give you a laugh. The people who really don't give you a laugh are kids. You work an audience of kids. A 10-year-old can't force a laugh. You got to make them laugh. And but there's no high like it either.
Right. That being said, did you test this out on your two boys?
My kids know.
They were
know
11 and 12, right?
They love the Mappo story.
Oh, they do?
love
Okay.
the Mappo's dead. They love that story, and they'll do that sometimes. And sometimes my son will say, a joke I didn't tell tonight. So I was going to tell that joke. Tell that joke. We love that joke. You know, and I didn't use it tonight, but it's they're into humor. The little one especially, who was on my closing show and imitates me. So Larry,
What is that like as a father to
It's a
see your
kick.
son imitate?
this kid is going to be. He's not going to be an accountant. Cannon is going to be in show business. He's I play music, and Chance is much more serious. The 12-year-old is. What do you mean by that? You know, I mean,
Analyzing.
yeah. What do you? Hello. You didn't say hello that way yesterday. Or when he wants to brush you off, they're not good. The 12-year-old's terrible on the phone. Hello, goodbye. Yeah, I love you. Goodbye.
All right, so your nephew was the one who kind of encouraged you to put this together.
He did.
He is a Broadway producer. You're going to tour the country, tour the world with the show. You got to be thinking at some point, Broadway.
All right. If I go to Broadway, and I think you could take this to Broadway, I think we could do well. It would have to be a limited engagement, a month. Because what I don't want to have happen, I hope it don't happen to me here, is the spice of doing Larry King Live was every night was different. Every guest was different, everything. Here, I'm going to be in Boston tomorrow night, and I have to do the same show. God, I don't want to get down to myself, and I don't want to get bored. I don't want to have my mind wander. I always said I'd like to do maybe a theater. I'd like to do a play. I've done a lot of movies, but I always play myself. I'd like to do a Neil Simon play. But would I be bored by the third night? Here comes the same line again.
But because you're doing stand-up or doing comedy, you can switch it up just a little bit.
Correct.
every
And
night, can't
what
you?
are they going to do? If
Right.
I go
they're
off
not,
on-
and they're not going to know.
No, they're not going to know. And also, I'll do some different stuff tomorrow. During bridges, before things you want to do something different. You tell, this joke I might tell tomorrow. There's so much material in my head that goes through the head.
I think when we were talking a few weeks ago, you said 4 hours. You probably have.
I probably have about 4
up
hours
there.
of material. I do.
And that's just stories and jokes.
Yeah,
and everything.
oh.
That's not, something that's based on stuff that you pulled out of Larry King
Hey,
Live.
I got to do something serious next week, and this is really interesting. In Seoul, South Korea, it's a big digital conference, and I'm the keynote speaker. And the guy spoke to me about what he wants, and they pay crazy money to get you to fly there. I hope my doctor lets me. I'm a heart patient,
Right.
and I have to visit him Wednesday, and he has to give the okay to fly 14 hours and 2 days fly back. It's a digital conference, and the guy said to me, "Mr. King, I know you do a lot of humor. I've seen you speak, but this is very serious. So we want you to talk about the future of connection. You've connected with people all these years, and now connection is the byword of everything that's happening, and there'll be people there from Yahoo and all this kind of thing." So I got this friend of mine who helps me write books, and he's really into tech stuff. So I said, "Okay, I'll pay you. Write me a 30-minute speech." And so I'm going to deliver a serious 30 minutes. They don't want any fool around. This is serious
Hopefully you'll
stuff.
have a prompter. You don't
I'll
have to
read
memorize
this.
it,
I'll
do you?
try to memorize. No, I won't memorize it. I'll have a prompter. I'll still try to throw in a joke. What the screw them.
All right. It's been 6 months, coming up on 6 months, since you walked away from Larry King
I
Live.
can't believe it.
In that time,
Don't
Mubarak left office. I got to do this. Japan, Gaddafi, and now they got Bin Laden. It's got to be eating you up.
Oh, the Bin Laden thing especially. Japan, you know, I've done a lot of tragedies, and I've done world leaders changing hands, and but still you miss it. But Osama, what a story that was.
It must, like I said,
I'd have been in there, because we try to get every, you know, I know Leon Panetta since from Congress. I'd call Leon, you know, try to. Sure, you miss it, but as I said on stage tonight, it is mixed emotions. I don't miss the Kardashians. I never liked British royalty stuff. I would not have been interested in that marriage at all. So it's like watching your mother-in-law.
Harry's on vacation this week while the royal wedding takes place.
Watching your mother-in-law go over the cliff in your new Cadillac is a good way to describe the mixed emotions. But sure, there are days I really, really do miss the mix. What really fascinates me, it always did in interviewing, when people don't have power anymore. I was at a restaurant in New York the other night with my brother, and Al Gore came in and sat down with us. And there's no Secret Service, and and he's like, Al, hey Al, how are you? You know, what's it like to be in the middle of it all?
Right.
And then nothing.
That must
Because when you're out, you're out.
But you're not necessarily, I mean, you did the special on Alzheimer's on CNN. You have Johnny Depp coming up on the next one. And he doesn't do stuff like this.
I think I will print somewhere, maybe to put it on Twitter or the back and forth emails that he sent to me. It's hysterical to read his interviews, to read I'm looking forward to him.
What is it that made it possible for him to say, I'll do this?
We met with Jerry Bruckheimer, who produced one of his movies and two of his movies, and he said he'd ask him. We made a request, then he sent me an email, and the email went something like this. I don't do interviews. I have to admit I admire your work. It's hard for me to say that, but I do admire your work. All this is, so I'm pondering, do I or don't I? Do I or don't I? Stay tuned. And then a week later, I'm across the pond at the moment.
Well, he lives in France, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he just finished one film. He's doing another one over there. Then he's coming back to do another one. And I don't want to do it to promote a movie. I want to just do it to do it. I don't want to do it to promote a movie. So my sister will call you. And I love her, be nice to her. All this kind. And so his sister called me, and he picked a date, and he picked just the September 23rd. I will give you an hour, and I'll come to your studio.
That's amazing.
And you have lunch with my sister a week before. No ground rules.
It would seem to me those emails would be good bump in and bump out.
Bump out. We ought to use them. Yeah.
To segments.
But I've always admired his work, of course. Now, oddly enough, my wife interviewed him when she did a show called Hollywood Insider on the USA Network on one of the junkets, you know, where they give you 5 minutes to promote a movie. And he was promoting Gilbert Grape, which I think was his first.
Was it? Jake would know. Jake, was that? Yes. Jake, our producer, who's a movie person.
That's when, so we said, I remember, so one of the producers called the house and tell Larry, Johnny Depp, we're fixing in on the date. She said, I know Johnny Depp.
I could have gotten him. Hey, I know you have a long day ahead of you, a long night ahead of you, and then to Boston tomorrow night. I want to thank you. This is payback time, as I said to you on the phone.
You're a good man. I love the tie.
We did I like yours too. We did the radio thing 23 years ago, and we're doing the TV thing
My
today.
pleasure, David. Good luck.
This is the start of a whole new phase for me. I've been doing speaking at conventions and the like for many years, but now it's new for me to sort of get booked into theaters. Tomorrow night we're in Boston, and next week we're in Indiana. I never thought I'd make it. Indiana. That's a goal. Anyway, the theme of the show is, why am I here? I had no idea this would ever happen to me, a little Jewish kid from Brooklyn, who suddenly finds himself on the world stage through CNN. I've had a lot of luck along the way. One of the luckiest things is my wife and kids. I mean, they are a blessing to me. The kids, by the way, were born without Viagra. It was amazing, and of course, my wife is young. Yeah, keep it up, lady. Get a good seat, you gotta throw it at me? Anyway, yeah, my wife, she's much younger than me, okay? And it's the same thing. Every time we're together, I know what people are thinking. You know what I mean? We're walking down the street, people look at us, I know what they're thinking. But I always say the same thing. If she dies, she dies.